So we are going to jump into things. So welcome everyone. My name is Krista and I'm joined by Hannah today. Today we're going to be walking you through how to use Akindi's automatic question importing and question scrambling. So a little bit of background on Akindi Online. So back in March of 2020, we released Akindi Online to support instructors in their online testing. So we are hearing from instructors that were using their LMS quiz tools that it was very time consuming to set up online assessments. We are hearing stories from people having to manually type each question or copy and paste it, or needing really specific document types or document formats. So we heard this and knew we could help. So we built Akindi Online and Akindi Question Scrambling with the automatic importing of test questions. We want to really preserve the things that people loved about Akindi. We want to make sure that it was easy to use, that it saved instructors time, and that it provided with instructors with control over their assessment. So today we'll be walking you through Akindi's automatic question importing, and I'm going to pass it over to Hannah. We will be answering questions throughout the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat or in the Q&A feature, and we will be stopping periodically to answer those. So Hannah, take it away.
Great, thank you, Krista. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So as many of you know, having used Akindi for quite some time, we do have an integration with learning management systems, and that's the same with online assessments as well. So I'm starting from Canvas today, and I can just launch my Canvas course into Akindi by clicking our Launch Akindi button here. And then I can see that, as expected, my course roster is populated. So I have the key information that I need in terms of student ID, the names of the students, email addresses, as well as the sections, as I have sections in my course. So really nice and easy, and just exactly how you would normally use Akindi. We go straight to create assessment. And we've made some changes to the actual workflow and setup of online assessments to actually streamline that process too. So I can see automatically the course that I launched from Canvas is populated in the course name. So I'll add an assessment name in here. And then we can actually choose in this step which type of assessment we want to run. So a paper or in-person assessment or online. So we're going to choose online for today. And you'll hopefully have seen that the preview on the right-hand side has changed. And this is in place to essentially give you a sense of what it will look like from the student's point of view. And we have a few different options when it comes to how the test questions are displayed and what that view looks like for the students. So what you can see on the screen at the moment in the preview is what we call display full PDF. So essentially this refers to the fact that you're going to be uploading a PDF file of your test questions, and they will appear on the left hand of the screen for the student in exactly the same format as they appear in your PDF file. So this is really useful if you have images, tables, diagrams in your assessments, because it means you can be assured that the contents will be displayed to the students as they appear in your file. And then you'll choose a bubble layout. So currently we have 100 question with options A through E. And that will appear on the right-hand side for the students, and they'll just click through the bubble options to select what they deem to be the correct answer there. The other options are I don't want to upload test questions. So this can be really useful if you just want to provide a way for the students to select their options and have that graded. We do have some instructors that like to actually provide these students with the test questions in a different format, such as having the students join a Zoom call and viewing the test questions that way. So this offers a little bit of flexibility if you do want to do that. And then our final option is one question at a time. And this is used in conjunction with our question scrambling feature as well. So to turn on question scrambling, we are just going to use this turn on multiple version. And the first option will appear is automated scrambling. Essentially, this means that Akindi is going to automatically scramble the test question document that you upload. So the students will see the questions in a randomized order. You don't have to do that yourself. Akindi automatically randomizes the order of the questions for you. Final thing I want to just call to your attention on this page. As you can see in the preview, we have the question index. So here the students can quickly navigate from one question to another using that index, as well as go back to previous questions if they need to. We do have the option to actually disable these features. So I currently have allowed backtracking on, so I can disable that. And this means that the students can only go forward, so they can't go back to any questions they previously viewed or answered if that has been disabled. For today, we're just going to leave it on so you can see what that looks like. I'm just going to pause here to see if there are any questions.
Great. So we do have one question here. What's the difference between the versions versus the automated scrambling?
Great. This is quite a common question, so thank you for asking that. Essentially, if I switch to versions here, versions means that you're actually going to be handling that randomization process yourself. So you will be creating multiple versions of your test questions, and you will upload those PDFs to Akindi. So Akindi won't be automatically doing that for you. And you will also be creating or adding in multiple versions of the answer key to go alongside each version. And the versions can only be used with the display full PDF option. So currently this can't be used with showing one question at a time. I believe that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Those are all the questions we have for now. If anyone has any questions, you can add them in the chat or in the Q&A.
Wonderful. Okay, so now we've set up the kind of main basics for the assessment. We're going to click Save and Continue. And this is where I'm going to import my test questions. Before I do that, I actually just want to bring up the Word document. So hopefully you can see that on the screen now. Essentially, I want to show you the fact that we haven't actually done a lot of crazy formatting. This actually is in a Word document, and it's in quite a similar style to the way a lot of instructors do set up their questions. So here I have the assessment name, the date for the assessment, it's quite an old one, instructions, and the questions are laid out just in terms of numbers, and then the responses are lettered. And I want to call to attention the fact that we've purposely actually included a couple of errors in here because we want to show you how to resolve those within Akindi. It can be quite common that you do have things you want to change even after you've imported the test. So we want to show you what that looks like if that does happen. Okay, so that's the document that we're going to be using today. So you can either drag or drop the file in, or you can click into the box here. And then we can click our sample document. So I can see now that's been successfully imported. So as I click continue, should actually show that Akindi has attempted to recognize and categorize the contents of that file. So straight away, I can see the number of questions that have been identified. I can see that I have some unidentified items that are going to need my attention. And this gives me the option to review the questions and answers that Akindi's recognized, as well as enter my answer key on this page. So we're going to start by going through some of the unidentified items. So the first are a couple of miscellaneous things like the title, the date, things that probably don't need to be displayed to the student while they're taking the assessment. So I can use this drop-down menu for each block, click in here, and then I can select omit. And this basically just indicates that this is now no longer going to be displayed to the students when they take their assessment. And I can also go through and enter the answer key just by selecting the correct response for that particular question. So the next instance is where in the document I hadn't actually put a letter by this answer option, so it didn't have an E by it. So Akindi wasn't quite sure how to categorize this. So I can go to the drop-down menu for this one and actually categorize this as an answer option. And our next mistake is the fact that we've included one of the answer options in the same line as the question. So what I can do here is I can actually edit in these blocks, but we can actually highlight this, cut it, and then we're going to add in a new block so we can create a new answer option for that item. So now I have a new one. I can just paste that in. And you may have seen it happen quite quickly there, so you may not have caught it, but I had an A in front of the Seattle, Washington, and Akindi actually immediately stripped that. So it will strip all of those things, and you'll just see the A's options that Akindi has actually added in itself. And the next one, which we found to actually be quite common, is often there can be a kind of preamble or a set of instructions that go before a question. And so again, for these type of things, because it didn't have a number before it, Akindi wasn't quite sure what to do with it. So essentially how I want this displayed in the assessment is I want to make sure that these two things are linked. So instead of having to go back to my Word document and edit it there and import the questions again, I can still make this change here. So I can actually merge this block of text with the next one. I click into the drop down and I use this merge with next option. So this has merged both blocks of text together, and then I can just identify that, categorize it as a question there. And then we have all of our answer options. And one more thing I want to just call it to attention. So if you want to change or control the question types or the weight of your questions, you can still do this now with the display advanced marking option here. And here I can make some changes there. So this is exactly as it appears on our legacy version of Akindi. So you have the same question type options and you can still change the weight there. Final thing is you may have seen we have this draft saved here. So even though I haven't clicked save and continue, everything that I've done on this page so far has actually been saved in the background, which is really useful in the event that you actually want to go away, have some lunch and come back to this later. If you accidentally lose connection or close the application itself, you can rest assured that all of the progress you've made has been saved, even though we haven't progressed to the next step. So I'm going to just pause for a moment to see if we have any questions that have come in around this particular page.
Great. The first question we have is it possible to add tables or images or diagrams to the questions or answers?
So unfortunately, at this time, we don't support questions which have those type of items in them. This is on our roadmap to deliver, and we will be looking to do this relatively soon. But if you do have these type of questions in your assessment, I would recommend selecting display full PDF, as we saw in the first step. That will allow you to include those question types in your assessment.
Mm-hmm. Next question. So what if an answer option has a letter in it? So for example, example A is the
Yep.
answer itself.
So if, for example, given that example, we had A here, Akindi, and all it was A, Akindi probably would recognize that as an answer option, which is why we do recommend that even if you have no unidentified items, just have a look through to make sure that everything has been categorized as expected, so you can make the necessary changes before moving on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to build on that a little bit, so Akindi looks for sort of a letter / number and then either a period or a bracket. So if it just says like A, capital A, train went to something, then it wouldn't recognize that as an answer option. It has to have that. And then, yeah, like Hannah said, you can always, that stripping happens before you see it here. So if you do notice any sort of errors there, you can handle it. The next question is asking about the accuracy of Akindi's automatic identification.
Great. So at the moment, we're actually aiming for a benchmark of around 90% accuracy in identifying and categorizing all of the options from Word documents.
Great. Last question. So you mentioned uploading a PDF document, but you uploaded a Word document. Can you just clarify sort of when you'd be uploading a Word versus when you'd be uploading a PDF?
Absolutely. So on the first step, when we were setting up the assessment and typing in the assessment name, we were able to choose the display type of the test questions there. For display for PDF, that's where you would be uploading a PDF file. But for one question at a time, you are going to be prompted to upload a Word document instead of a PDF file. So hopefully that explains the difference there.
Mm-hmm. Those are all the questions we have right now.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we're ready to move on. We'll click Save and Continue to move on to our next step. And this is where we're going to be setting up the timings for the assessment. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is our activation time and deadline. This essentially acts as the window in which students can access their online assessments. So activation time essentially just refers to the start time, so when they can view the questions and start selecting responses. And the deadline is when the assessment will close. So I can set that up so that opens. Let's make sure that it's already open. And then we'll choose to give the students 24 hours to actually access the assessment. And this is where the time limit up here comes in handy. So we can actually say that even though we have a 24-hour window in which students can access the assessment, when they do start taking that assessment, they need to complete it within an allotted time. So here I can say they need to complete it within 2 hours. If you don't want to make use of the time limit, that's not an issue. You can actually just choose to disable it there, and Akindi will not have a time limit in place. So if there's no questions on this page, I will move on. So at this point, we've actually kind of set up all of the kind of key basics that we need to for the online assessment. So there's just a few other things that you may want to do. So the first is we know that instructors do have often a number of students that require accommodations or extra time for their assessment. And you can actually use this online assessment page to actually make those changes. So I can select the students that require accommodations from the table. We click on our Actions drop-down menu, click Edit Assessment Timing. And you'll see in the banner here that it says that I'm customizing the assessment timing for 2 students in the course. And none of the other students will be affected. They will still have the same assessment times that I set up in the prior step. So I can actually say that these students are going to have 3 hours to complete the assessment instead of 2. We click Save and Continue again. And then in the table, I can see that that change has been applied. So these students have 3 hours, whereas all of the rest of the students have 2. Then we're going to go on to actually just finally emailing our students the online assessment. So just in case you're not aware, with Akindi, all of the students actually require a unique URL in order to access their online assessment. And this is emailed from the Akindi application. So by default, all of these students are selected. I don't need to individually select all of the students. So I can go straight to the email students online assessment option. And here I can choose to customize the assessment email. So I can make a change here, as well as the message. And then I can just confirm that this is going to be sent to 21 students. So all of the students in my course roster. Great, so you're immediately going to see that we have a lot of errors that have come up. These are in fact just fake email addresses, which is why that has come up. But I do have my own email address on here, which shows that it has been successfully delivered. This is really useful just for some reassurance to make sure that the emails have been successfully delivered to the students, and making sure that you can intervene if anything does come up that has caused an error. When the student actually opens the email, we'll see that that status changes from delivered to opened. So you can also monitor that as well. The next thing that I want to call attention to is our questions completed. So even before the students have submitted, while they're still taking the assessment, we can actually monitor the number of questions they've completed on the test. So for example, I can see that this student has completed 5 questions. It's really useful in terms of monitoring the student progress. And finally, on our submitted column, when the students do submit, we will see the status change to from no to yes. So you can monitor the number of students that have actually submitted their assessment. Great. I'm just going to pause for some questions on this page before we turn to the student experience side of things.
Great, we do have a few questions that have come in. So is it possible to make changes to the deadline or the time activation after the email has been sent out?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that is possible. So even after we've sent the email, we can actually just go to actions, edit assessment timing, and make changes for the whole class. Or again, we can select particular students and make changes for those students. The students, that will immediately need be applied to the assessment. If the student is currently in the middle of taking the assessment, they may just need to refresh the page in order to see that time limit, the countdown timer actually change and be applied for their assessment.
Is it possible to preview the assessment or see what the student will see before actually sending it out to students?
Yes, this is a really common question, so thank you for mentioning this. We don't have a preview function within the Akindi application just yet, but it is possible for us to actually create a workaround to do the same thing. So to do that, we can just click this Manage Course Roster button here, which opens the course roster for us in another tab. And then I can actually just enter my own email address. So I have done that here, but I can enter another person into the course roster. Then when we come back here, you can actually just choose to only email that assessment to yourself and make sure that the timing is set so that you can open the assessment before the rest of the students. So we do have a full tutorial guide on how to achieve that preview workaround, which we can share after the webinar.
And then one last question. So they said that they have had experiences where students lose internet connection while they're writing the assessment. How will Akindi handle that? Is a student able to restart the assessment after they lose connection?
That is a really great question. I'm actually going to show you what happens on the student side of things. So bear with me one moment, but I will answer that question.
Okay.
So from the student side, this is what they would see. So this is the email that I received from Akindi, and essentially what always will appear in these emails by default is the name of the course, the name of the assessment, our activation time, the deadline, and if you have a time limit in place, that will also be displayed here. So I can click Start Assessment. And here we'll see that essentially, oh, sorry, one moment. I'm actually just gonna click onto, this was the wrong one. There we go. So we can see here that essentially we have a list of assessment instructions that the student needs to agree to before actually beginning the assessment. So these are just things in order to verify that the correct information is being displayed, such as their name, their student ID number, and this is the correct course, the correct assessment for them. So once they've read through those instructions and they're ready, we'll click I agree, and Akindi determines when the student has started as when they click I agree. So when we select this, we'll see the timer actually begins, our countdown timer. And we can start selecting some responses. So I just click on the bubble item that has the correct answer, or what I deem is the correct answer. And we can click on to the next question. And again, we can use that index if we need to actually skip back or ahead to future questions. Now, to answer the question about what happens if the student loses connection, essentially, I'm going to show you. So let's say they accidentally close the application, or we assume that the connection has been lost. The student can go back to their email. They'll have to click I agree again to access the assessment. But we can actually see that our responses have been saved here. So we can go through, and I haven't actually lost any of these. So we can continue through our assessment. And again, I can use the previous. So if we had the backtracking option disabled, this wouldn't appear and this wouldn't appear for the students. And then when we come to the final question, we have the option to submit. I'm just going to pause here to see if anybody has any questions on the student front.
So we have a question around the connection again. So would a student be able to essentially use that as like a vulnerability and get access to the assessment for a longer period of time, be able to like look at all the questions, answer them, and then come back and have more time?
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that. So you may have noticed, but essentially the time remaining didn't stop our countdown timer. So if I as a student choose to try and view all the questions and come back in 2 days, I'm not going to be able to, because that countdown timer will have elapsed. And when that happens, Akindi will automatically submit a student's response on their behalf. So when the deadline closes or when the time limit has run down, whichever happens before. So they'll still have the same amount of time as all the other students.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So even if they leave for 20 minutes and they come back, then they'll have 20 less minutes on that time. Is it possible to randomize the answers as well as the questions?
Good question. This is also something that we've had requested quite a lot. At the moment, Akindi is just randomizing the order of the questions, not the answers as well. But this is something that we're considering on adding for our product roadmap.
Great. Those are all the questions that we had for the student side.
Wonderful. Okay. So when the student's ready, they'll click submit here. They'll just receive a confirmation modal. So this is essentially just telling them that once they do click this submit button, they'll be unable to edit any of their responses. They're not going to be able to go back and view the questions again or make any further changes. So we click submit, and this is the completion message that the student will see. So I know that that's been successfully submitted to Akindi. Just to confirm to you, I can refresh the page again, and I'm still seeing that completion message. I'm not able to see the questions again. So once that's happened, essentially what will happen next is that will go straight into the responses. So it will actually be, as soon as each student submits, you'll actually see those submissions come in real time. You won't need to wait until all of the responses have been submitted. So in advance, we had a couple of, just to make sure we had enough responses in here to show you the analytics. We have some other student submissions in here. But on our first page, the overview, this essentially is the analytics that Akindi provides about each assessment, and it aims to answer 2 questions. So the first is, how did my students do? And the second is, how well was my test designed? So this is exactly the same thing that you would see for in-person assessments or previous online assessments that you may have run in the past, but we have our overall grade percentage average, the highest grade percentage on the test, as well as the lowest achieved. Our easiest questions, as deemed by Akindi, based on the number or the percentage of students that got that answer correct. And if we hover over any of these, we can actually see that breakdown of the percentage or number that chose each answer option. Same for the most difficult questions on the test. And then on the how well was my test designed section, we actually have our discriminatory score question displayed here. So Akindi will call attention to what it deems the best constructed questions. And if you had any questions that perhaps may require some intervention or for you to review, that would also be called out here as well. Then on our graphs, we will see the kind of breakdown for each of the students and the grade percentage they've received, the grade distribution for the course roster as a whole. On our answer breakdown, we'll see the number of correct versus incorrect responses for each question. And if I click onto any of these bars, I can see that breakdown of who selected or how many responses have been selected for each of these questions. And finally, we'll see that point by serial, the discriminatory score for all of the questions on the test, not just the ones that Akindi's decided to call attention to. And then finally, we have our full breakdown of the responses here. So this is very similar to what you may have experienced or seen with our in-person in terms of the information that's provided. The only additional thing that you will see here is our submission time. So you can actually monitor when the students submitted their assessments here. And I can see again the grade percentage, the marks for each of the students, as well as the responses that they selected for each question. We still have a number of different things that you can do with the results. So we can export the results or some of the analytics by using the download CSV option, our download question breakdown CSV option. And we can also provide some item analysis to the students by actually using the email students their grade option. Where they can see which questions they got correct versus incorrect, as well as actually having the correct answers displayed on the sheet if you choose to display that. And then finally, we can send the grades back to the learning management system just by clicking our send grades to, in my context canvas. And as usual, we can select whether there's an existing grade column in the Canvas gradebook or if I want to create a new one for this assessment, and we can still scale those marks for the gradebook if necessary. So I'm just going to pause here to see if we have any questions around the results.
There's a question around emailing students their grades. Will the students see the question content in what they receive?
That's a really good question. At this time, they will not. So essentially, they will just see the answer option they selected, and that would be, for example, they selected BC, they selected A. They will not see the content of the question or the content of the answer options on the report at the moment.
And there was also a question about, is it possible to print out the corrected answer sheets?
Yes, so we do have our option download corrected sheets, and this is used by a lot of instructors for in-person tests. At the moment, this is not supported with online assessments. So if you do want to provide students with their item analysis, you can use the email students their grade function instead.
Those are all the questions that we had at the moment.
Great, okay. So we're just going to head back to our dashboard. And finally, I just wanted to show you a few more things that we can do from the dashboard. So this is the kind of quickest way to navigate or make changes once your assessment's set up or is currently going on. So at any point, if I want to make changes to the test questions, I can go in here to our edit questions and answers, and we can make those changes. We can quickly edit the assessment timing for the whole class here and view online assessment data. So this is where we can make changes to the individual students' assessment schedules, as well as actually use it to monitor what's been going on within the assessment, how many questions have been completed, and who has submitted their assessment. Finally, I just wanted to highlight our chat function. I'm sure many of you know about this, but here is where you can actually view a number of our help articles, so our tutorials, videos, and if you're unable to find an answer there, you can actually message our support team using this chat function here, and we aim to respond within 30 minutes. Great. That's everything that I wanted to showcase today. I just want to turn over to see if there's any final questions or anything else that I can show you before I hand over back to Krista.
We don't have any questions at this time.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'm going to hand back to Krista now and just stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us through our live in-app chat. Before you go, we would love to hear from you to help us build sort of what's next for Akindi. We'd love to know what specifically is sort of most time consuming or most frustrating when making your online assessment. So feel free to drop that in the chat. We will use these responses to help decide the next features to build. So we'd love to hear what's most time consuming and what is most frustrating. Yes, and I see a question about getting a recording. Yeah, we'll share the recording of this with the sessions. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much for attending, and I'm glad to hear you're excited to use it. Awesome.
Great. Okay. Thank you for continuing to add some feedback and comments in the chat. If you have any feedback regarding Krista's question, please do also reach out to us using our support chat as well. We'll keep an eye on that just in case you needed a little bit of time to think about that.
Right. I'm so glad you love Akindi. Awesome. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we will chat with you later.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.